everyone, Brian Gottlieb here. And
It's Endell here.
What's up, everybody?
I'm Amy.
I'm Hank.
And we're Goblin Reserve.
I'm Matt Rogers. I'm from PCG.
I'm Craig Krempels.
James White here, listening to the Instant Speed Podcast.
This is the Instant Speed Podcast.
You're listening to the Instant Speed Podcast.
Welcome to the Instant Speed Podcast.
to welcome you to the Living Legend Podcast. Nope, wrong podcast. What's the name of your podcast, Flink?
Not Arsenal Pass.
You're listening to the Instant Speed Podcast, easily the second best podcast for the Flesh and Blood game.
Big shout out. Hopefully Flake's found somebody other than me to be on it this time.
Hit that like and subscribe button now.
Games is the industry leader in both service and unique events in the TCG arena. Whether it's running the largest community-run tournaments for Flesh and Blood or providing service with a generosity that is unique to the Realm Games, you can count on the Realm for an unforgettable experience. Check out their website at realmgamingnetwork.com for details about their $50,000 Flesh and Blood tournament circuit happening all across North America. But check out everything else going on at the Realm, including tournaments for all kinds of other experiences. And just for you, ISP listeners, use the code INSTANT5, that's INSTANT 5, to get 5% off your checkout when you're buying from the Realm.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 116 of the Instant Speed Podcast. I have with me a 4-pack. Well, I'm included in the 4-pack, so we'll say it's a 3-pack, I suppose. It's Team Runaways, or Fabled Runaways. We're going to cut through all that noise and figure out exactly what the name is. But I have Yuanji Lee, I have Daniel Rutkowski, and I've got Cody Williams of acclaimed team of Runaways. And Dan, I'm going to start with you, my friend. First, I want to say welcome to the show, everybody, obviously.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. Brought to you, obviously, by the Realm Games. We've got to get that out of the way. You and I, Dan, spent some extended time in a hot tub on a boat, sailing at high speeds, piracy galore. But we were just chatting, and we said, it'd be really cool to sort of catch up and have a little bit of a discussion regarding team dynamics. And here we are. So I am very excited because Pro Tour's around the corner. Teams are going to be integral. So before we dive into that, and we say our hellos, I do want to just announce the winner of a $50 credit at the Realm Games. And last week I said, hey, tell me what hero you absolutely freaking hate playing against, but you have to also say one nice thing about that hero. And the winner is Vanderhayden, saying that I hate playing against Icelander and Commoner, but I'm glad it exists in the format, so it's not just a speed race. Also, it's basically the same deck as the one that won Worlds. Good call. I like it. All right, so congratulations, Vanderhayden. Send me a message, and I will hook you up with $50 of credit at the Realm Games. All right, so let's talk Runaways. And the major issue here is, at first, is basically the fact that, well, teams have been very prevalent very quickly within competitive card gaming. And when it comes to Team Runaways or Fabled Runaways, this is not a new team necessarily, but it's one that is very quickly sort of cemented itself as the real deal, as a team of really high-end competitors. So I don't know where this all began and who's best suited, so I'll let you guys figure this out. Where did this all come from? And Tarek Patel of Team TCG Pass is the one who kind of threw that out there. What is the origin of the team and how did they all come together? So who wants to take a stab at this?
Yeah, I'll take this one on. And please bear with me. I'm not the best storyteller. I tend to go a little too deep on important details. This might take a while, but I'll take you through the history of Runaways, how we got to where we are, where we started. But really started with PT Lil. Before that, we were, everyone on this call, besides Cody Yuanji and I were part of the Hyperloops, which is like incredible community, great for getting better at the game, practicing. And we were the chain gang, right? Like we were the chain guys. We were playing chain before it was cool. We were playing chain when it was cool. We were playing chain when it was bad. And this is what we did. We played the same deck. We performed great. Didn't matter. New set came out. We play chain. Starvo comes out. We adjust. We play chain. But then chain hit Living Legend all of a sudden, and it wasn't us who put him there. So when that happened, I was like, I was lost for a new deck. It was like 2 weeks before PTLO. And I forget who said it. I think it was Cody. And he was just like, just play Fi. You'll beat all the Prisms. And it's like a pretty good aggro deck. I was like, yeah, you're right. I'll just play Fi. And he's like, Shane has this really good list he's been working on. So I hit up Shane Martin. He gives me the list. We work together for like 2 weeks. I refine it a little bit. I take it to PTLO. I do great. I lose a single CC game, which unfortunately was on stream, and I get absolutely smashed. Like, it's a terrible game against Old Time. But after that event, it was like, I don't know, like the fourth major, semi-major in a row where I was like 1 game or 1 round short of top 8. And I was like, I'm kind of sick of this. Like, I was like fired up at the airport. I was like, I see people on Twitter like making moves on teams and that kind of thing. I'm like, I need something more focused. I need something like very refined, because like I know I can do this if I put in the time and the structure. And I knew Shane was already looking, so I was like messaging him at the airport, like, "Hey, do you find anything? Like, what are you thinking?" He's like, "No, nothing really sticking out for like a team to join." I was like, "I feel like we could just like make a thing and like figure this out." He's like, "Yeah, probably." And then as I was at the airport, I saw Yuanji tweet looking for a team. I was like, "Hey, how'd that go? You find anything?" He's like, "No, not really." I was like, "Shane and I are thinking we could figure this out." And he's like, "I'm in." So then that was really it. It was just us messaging. I was like, okay, 3-person group chat. We're forming a team. Let's figure out how this works. We then established that we're going to figure out how to be a team. And it's like a kind of a made up concept, right? Like, we decided we're a team. That was the start of Runaways. We just said we're Runaways, right? We didn't have a name yet. So it starts us 3. We're like, we're gonna figure out who to add. Like, we have all these really good, talented friends that we're already practicing with. Like, how do we do this? But it's like, oh wait, the national championship is in like 3 weeks. We'll figure that out later and just like prep for the event. Right after that, I think Yuanji hit up the group and it was like, hey, what do you think about bringing in Brody? Brody Spurlock, of course. And the first time I met him was at PTLO, the last one of the event. I had beaten him that game, and then we talked for like a literal 40 minutes about the game and the matchup and like decisions that were made. I was like, yeah, if I can have that deep of a conversation about the game we just played, yeah, bring him in. That sounds perfect for a testing group. So we just brought him in, and then it was the 4 of us working on Nats. Brody joined like 2 weeks before Nats. Like, he couldn't join the Phi train and like the deck we're working on, where like I was so proud of that deck we built. Like, UNG's innovation coming in with like the E-Strikes. I don't know how we weren't playing E-Strike before in 5, but that was like the big breakthrough there. But Brody played Briar, and then Brody and I both make top 8, and I do the deep run, get second. I lose to Hamilton's. We get all the stream time. I go at like 13-0 in Swiss or whatever. And then UNG just tweets out, "We're a team," before we like even establish what it meant to be a team. So at that point, I guess that was the inception. Like, UNG made a tweet saying, "We're a team."
There you
I
go.
guess it's a thing now. Now we have to figure it out. But guess what? Worlds is in 3 weeks. So it's like, we never really figured out like the structure and like the formality of being a team. We just had to like do our best as we prepped for these majors and just kept doing it. And then flash forward a year, and now we kind of figured it out, I guess. It's still kind of the same.
That's kind of where I want to get to, because if you mentioned just what you said there, it's kind of the same. This inception and the creation of the team, the origin of it was, like you said, you realize that you need you need kind of other minds to bounce your ideas off of. You need people of the same quality of player that you are. Yuanji throws out the tweet. You all came out playing more or less the same play style initially. What has changed essentially is now you've got more members and there's more organization, etc. So let's talk a little bit about who those members are. And I'll ask you, Cody, because from the initial onset of Dan and Yuanji coming together, finding each other's tweets haphazardly and saying, screw it, we're a team, it seemed like it just went from, okay, we all just need people to practice with, to now let's bring on more minds, more insight, more perspective. Cody, when did you join the team, and where are we at now in terms of membership?
So I joined, I think it was like shortly after Worlds. was when I joined. I was one of the leaders of the Hyperloop's like Flesh and Blood division. It was myself and Joe Cologne. And at that point, I kind of wanted to get a team that was a little bit more serious, a little bit more locked down versus in like being in a community type of atmosphere. And we were just hanging out at an Airbnb. It was like Dan, myself, and Joe. And Dan mentioned, he was like, well, we wanted to invite you at the beginning of the, inception, but we didn't know how that would work with you being on Hyperloops. And Joe, the guy who I was, kind of partners with for the Fab division, he was just like, I think you're going to do a lot better if you just go to Runaways. And so kind of with Joe's blessing, we kind of dissolved that part of my partnership. And then I joined Runaways as, like one of the organizational owners as well. Because there's like there's two spots. There's the org Runaways and then there's the team Runaways as well. Right now, I think we're at about, there's like 14, I think is what we're at.
17.
17? 17? Ooh. We went up a couple. I think it's like, but it's a little smaller active for, I'm confusing it with our Pro Tour cycle, who's actually playing for Pro Tour, because we have a couple of members who aren't playing Pro Tour. But yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Okay, so let me ask you this here, because again, like what you said right there, that little reaction of like, oh, we just got a couple more. It seems like every time the bus is driving, you're just like, the Dumb and Dumber thing of like, pick them up, like let's just throw them on there. Yuanji, when you threw out that tweet initially, at what point did you think that this was going to, just grow to the size it is now, which is, like you mentioned, 17 members of this team of Team Runaways?
Yeah, I think initially when we were trying to figure out like what the ideal team size was, I think we had in mind like around 8 to 12. This was when we had first gotten together. I think now it's like two different things that you have to balance. You have to balance when you have a larger team, how you can make sure that everybody on the team is getting value. So that's challenging. And I think the other thing is making sure that also everybody who is on the team is contributing value to the team in some way. And so I knew when we decided that we would try to make a team that I didn't have any doubt that it would become successful or that we could grow it out, but I didn't really have like an idea, I guess, of what it would look like today or maybe like in the future.
This is a symptom that's not necessarily just unique to Runaways. A lot of the teams have expanded to certain numbers, and what you mentioned there is a very good point, because at a certain, juncture within the team's growth, you have to think, how many, bringing on a new player, how much of this is valuable to the team and how much of it is just uniquely valuable to that new member? Because I'll be completely honest with you, I'm not on a team, and if I were to join one, I'm not contributing to the betterment beyond being a target dummy for either drafts or playing particular heroes or whatnot. I consider myself a good player. I'm definitely not on the level of you three, but the point I'm trying to make here is what are the criteria of bringing somebody on? And obviously what you said, Yuanji, of they have to bring value to the team. But a lot of people who are, quote unquote, applying or wanting to join teams, a lot of them are doing so from the simple angle of, I just want to play with better players than me so that I can improve. And in which case, you guys got to think, at what point is it just, detrimental to bring on a player who is not necessarily like one of the top 50 in the world, but ultimately just something where it's like, yeah, maybe they're like a top 100 player, but that kind of brings us down a little bit, but maybe we need extra bodies, extra perspective. Is there a criteria that you all look at when you're bringing on a team, a new team member? And I'll ask you, Dan, what those criteria might be.
So it's really been opportunistic for us. Like we don't just like, we're not recruiting like every month or anything like that or all the time. It's like been like, we need people for this event, so we're going to get people for this event. Like PT Baltimore is the reason we went from 8 to 16 teammates. That set came out, I think, 3 weeks before the event. So we had to learn a new draft format and a new CC format. So we're like, all right, open the doors. We need more bodies. We need more people to figure this out. So that's kind of how we've been operating so far. It's like, I would love for us to be at a place where we can just onboard anyone who adds value and would be a good fit for the organization. Like, I think we could support 30 plus people. But it's hard. Like, we've had the same, for the most part, team for about a year now. I think we've been at around this side. We had a couple people move on and a couple people come in. But I really like the group we have, and like our team works really well together. We trust each other. So like, we also have to protect that. So it's really like complex, and like the social dynamics are hard. Like our focus is really protecting the team at this point, because we know what we're doing is working. We know our process is working. That said, like, I don't know, the criteria is kind of a little open-ended. It's really just like, can you add value?
Sure.
Like there's so many different ways to add value. That's the baseline, right? Like, do you add something that helps the organization, that helps the team, that helps a large amount of people on the team? I don't know, there's a lot of ways. Like, you don't have to win a pro tour to be on the team. Like it's like, if you're gonna put in the time and like test more than anyone else in the world, like, yeah, we probably want you on the team. Like, that's a lot of data.
Yeah, let me cut in also, because when you set up the question, Flake, you're framing it in terms of how somebody can contribute to the team in terms of the results that they can get. But honestly, like, you can be like a top 5 player and be not necessarily that helpful to the team dynamic as a whole. And I think that there's a lot of players out there, you can't just like judge them by their results, because you know, there's a lot of variance, as well as there's some players who, you know, just aren't in the right environment for them to be really successful. I think when we picked up Brody Spurlock, I think all he had was like, he topped the Battle Harden, but I knew that he was going to be like a really good player if you put him in the right system with like the right people around him. And so I think more so than results, just like having a passion for the game, like being very invested and involved in trying to kind of figure out what is the best way to play the game, as well as kind of sharing that with the team members, I think is the most important aspect of any member that we are looking to add.
Right. I mean, I just threw out like an arbitrary number of like top 50. I mean, ultimately, value is a subjective thing, and it's not like an objective number that I'm looking at where you can say, well, you need to be this elo to be on the team. That's definitely, obviously, not what it's going to be. But at a certain point, like you mentioned, you know, we can accommodate 30. At a certain point, it becomes a situation where you're like, are you just opening up a Starbucks across the street from a Starbucks? Like at what point does that really just cut into your own progress as a team? Because, I mean, I want to get into this. I wanted to get into this later, but we can just dive into it now. I mean, we're flowing that way anyways. At a certain point, the growth of a team, to a certain degree, there's going to be a lot of competing ideologies, a lot of competing outlooks in terms of what is correct, what is wrong. And I'm always for hearing ideas, but there's a lot of personalities within a team that might conflict to the degree of, you know, and I've heard it before, people just get pissed off and leave because they feel like they're right and they cannot reconcile a disagreement properly. So let me ask you guys this, and I'll ask you, Cody, when it comes to this many conflicting viewpoints about a particular game, how do you reconcile those types of disagreements? You have 17 people now, and moving into Pro Tour, the meta currently is quite volatile. There's a lot of people and a lot of conflicting opinions of what is right, what is wrong, what's good, what's bad. How does Team Runaways approach these types of disagreements?
Yeah, I think it's a lot simpler than people think it is. The issue with a lot of teams, when they're trying to beat the same strategy into every player on the team, and that's just not something that we do. We allow a lot of flexibility with the members to play whatever deck they want to play, irregardless if a majority of the team thinks that deck is trash. Like, you can absolutely still bring it to a major, and we're not going to mind at all. It's also like why at Nationals we had 5 people, like 5 different decks or something like that in the top 8. It was like ridiculous, but we allow a freedom to improve yourself. Obviously, this is like we're a team, right? But it's not necessarily a team game. It's a team game in some aspects, but it's kind of a winner take all format, right? So at the baseline of card games is going to be you trying to win the tournament for yourself. And so the idea of a team is to bring a bunch of people together who all want nothing more than to win the same tournament. And then to have all of those players then understand their best chance at winning that tournament is interacting with this other group of people, sharing information, and looking at other people's ideas. So all of this is born from a mutual respect of the same exact goal that every single person on the team has. And because we all have that goal, even if we disagree, I think X deck is stronger than X deck. You just play whatever deck you want to play. When it comes down to someone receptive, then, hey, I don't know what I think is strongest. I'm a little confused at what's happening right now. What can I do? That's when they have the freedom to then go to someone else. But we have never gone to anyone on the team and been like, you can't play that. It's not good enough, right? You can't play that way. We have gone to people and been like, hey, this is a mistake. Like, you're making a mistake in the game. Let's talk through it and fix it. But the bottom line is the reason we're very selective on who's on the team is because the mentality of people on the team is simply, we're all here with mutual respect trying to win the same tournament. And bringing in more people could disrupt that. And so, like, one of the requirements for being in there. I did want to mention that's also the reason we don't run into as many of these issues. A lot of these people are pulled in for specific reasons. They might be a specialist on a deck, right? We've mentioned this before. Like, Connor is great at Dash. Dash is his deck. If I have any questions for Dash, I'm going to Connor. We have Fino. Fino's great at Dromai. When I'm learning how to play Dromai, I go to Fino. Hey, let's talk about this matchup. And we have multiple people for, different types of roles like that. And they know that's why they came in. We also have people who we've sat down across the table with and played against, and they showed something that was very impressive. They said, hey, I want more of that. Example of that is Naib. Naib is my recruit for the most part. I sat down across from Naib before going to nationals. I'm playing Icelander. He's playing Icelander. We're playing a mirror. He's teaching me things. This is like 2 weeks before nationals. He's teaching me things in a mirror that I thought I'd already had solved for the most part. We were like super confident in the mirror. He teaches me a couple of new lines I never thought of. And then it was my only game I ever went to time because we just couldn't do anything against each other. I left that, went back to Dan and Lucas because we're all like testing the deck at the same tournament. And we're just like, I'm like, hey, Naib showed me this, this, and this. If we do this, we can play this card in the mirror. We can play it this specific way in this specific situation. And then it feels like this to the opponent when you play it. And we're like, oh, that's great. And then none of us ever lost a mirror after that. It's like, that was someone on my list when I went to, hey, when we're going to start recruiting again, because we're not recruiting right now. Like we've had to turn away a bunch of really good players that people would probably be surprised we had to turn away because we're just not recruiting right now. And when we opened it up, we said, hey, we can recruit a couple more people for, this next cycle. Naib was one of the person I threw up there. It's like, hey, Naib, I had this game. I liked how he thought about this. I liked some of his deck builds. I like, this thing about him. Let's talk to him and see where he's standing at. And that's another way that, we bring people in as well.
So let me ask you this, because ultimately what you mentioned earlier, that, hey, we'd never tell somebody not to play something. And obviously the fact that there are particular specialists on a team, that's a great thing. I think that's a really brilliant idea to have people who are legitimately, I don't want to say hard locked into a particular hero, but just the fact that it's like, you have like 1,000 reps on Illusionist. We want you, and we're never going to shoehorn you to play a particular deck. We just want you to play your specialty into us, teach us this matchup, because we're going to have to play against it particularly. But at a certain point, there has to be certain decisions made of like, hey, I need, X, Y, Z to, like, for example, in a particular draft situation, like let's run a particular draft scenario where, nobody drafts Guardian or something like that. Let's say for heavy hitters. Let's see how that shakes out. Yuanji, is there somebody on the team that makes these calls? Is there a captain or a leader or somebody who sort of takes the reins?
I think that, like, Cody brought it up a little bit. I think we do have some semblance of authority structures in the sense that there are people, like Cody said, like if Fino, if we're talking about like a Dromai matchup, like Fino is the authority on there. That doesn't mean that he can't be wrong, but that more likely than not we're going to listen to his opinions. And so when it comes to deciding on like what the appropriate strategy is, I think that the way that we frame how our organization interacts with the teammates is more so that like we're kind of just presenting all of the stuff that we found, and ultimately you're playing like an individual you're playing like an individual sport, like on tournament day. So it's your responsibility to kind of make use of all the resources that you have available to you. So nobody is like really directing somebody, but like, oh, this is like the quote unquote correct draft strategy. It's more so like, here are all the different draft strategies that we think are good. And then on game day, it's like, it's up to you to decide like how you want to play it.
So let me ask you this then, Dan. If from a non-gameplay perspective, when it comes to decision-making within the team, for example, like recruiting a new member, is it a full-on democracy within the team of like, hey, this is the person being like, or, you know, let's say Lucas is sponsoring this person or recommending this person for the team. Is it just a flat-out, okay, all members get a vote, majority rules, or is there like a panel, like you mentioned, like is it just the OG team members? Is there a structure, a hierarchy to a degree? Because there's a lot of people who see teams and don't necessarily know anything beyond the fact of, all right, well, when we take our top 8 photo, everybody throw up your gang symbols of like whoever the hell you represent or wear your jerseys or whatnot. There's a lot more moving parts, obviously, and somebody's got to make a final call on decisions like new members. And how does that work?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Like there's 4 of us kind of in the leadership roles on the org side. It's the 3 of us here, and then Ethan Mansan, of course. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of both in that regard. Like for adding people to the team, it's like mostly democracy. Like we're really focused on protecting the team, right? Like we're not going to bring in 3 people that no one on the team wants to bring in, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. That would never work. So like for team ads and that kind of thing, you kind of have to do a group decision. For like everything else, like we try and start at our level, like at the leadership level. One, because like we need to be able to move fast on some things. Like we need to be able to make decisions. We kind of operate under that model and then let the team kind of veto if they think something's a bad idea. And it's like, okay, we won't do that. That's happened a couple of times this year. We were like set on doing something. The team was like, no, I don't think we should. And we're like, okay. And the other thing is like, we don't want the team spending time on things that we can handle, right? Like part of our job is to facilitate and create this environment that they can practice and prep the best they can. And there's no reason to have 17 people solve the same problem, right? That's just not efficient. So it's both is the short answer.
No, that's fair. That's definitely fair. Like the whole point of this interview here is with you 3 gentlemen is the fact that I just want to pull the curtain back because teams are becoming the meta, as it were, quote unquote. I mean, the fact is that this is a very complex game. It's not a matter of, you know, I can just grind Hearthstone for 10 hours a day and it'll all boil down to 3 decks and I just need to know how to play them and hope I draw correctly. There's so many moving parts within this that matchups are key. Their sideboards are key. But there's another element to this, which is the Fabled part of the Fabled Runaways, which is Saint and Fabled Hunters and that relationship with the Runaways. So, Cody, I don't know if you're the best person to talk about this or if it's Dan again. But
no, it's Yuanji.
Oh, it's Yuanji.
Pass it over to him.
Let's go. All right, so Yuanji, talk to us a little bit about the partnership between Fabled Hunters and Saint and Team Runaways. What is that relationship like? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's pretty funny. I think most people, I guess, learn from an incorrect slide on the celebrational presentation that said that Saint was one of the founding members of Runaways, which is not the case. But basically, Saint and I have been making YouTube videos on the Fabled Hunters channel for quite some time. And he's this guy who lives, I would say, like a very unique life compared to most of the people who play Flesh and Blood. And so his way of interacting with the tournament scene, he's like somebody who really enjoys, competitive scenes, not just like in trading card games, but he follows like League of Legends. I'm pretty sure he played competitive poker when he was younger. He's somebody who's like very involved or enjoys the competitive aspect of these games that we play. And for someone in his position with his current kind of life responsibilities, felt like he wanted a way to interact with a team. And I think originally, like a long time ago, he was really supportive of Matt Rogers and what is now like the majority of like PCG Pass, just out of his like personal friendship. But when I told Saint that we were forming Runaways, he was kind of all in on supporting me as a personal friend. And we're still like working out like some of the details. Some of the interactions that we have with Fabled Hunters it's not like there's no like contract. It's not like set in stone, but the basic premise is that Saint wants to support North American Flesh and Blood, and Saint wants to do that by things such as advising me on like how to grow an organization. He's advising us on, or he's helping us out during the tournament by like treating us to dinner, so we don't have to like worry about stuff like that, so that people can have a good mental during the weekend. He's doing so by kind of being, if somebody wins a gold foil, he's really happy to pick it up, and then we open it on the channel, right? And these are all things that that is his way of contributing to the team. And I think since the celebrational, when he got a little bit more hands-on with the rest of the team and kind of got actual like gameplay advice from them, and he ended up doing really well. I think he is starting to feel that like what we're building is real, and we're always thinking about like further ways to kind of expand our relationship between Fabled Hunters and the team. But basically it's just that he was like one of our like first supporters, in a kind of crappy economy where not a lot of people are looking to sponsor. Like he's willing to help us out in whatever ways that he feels like he can.
Look, the value added to a team just by virtue of somebody not even just covering the check at dinner, but organizing dinner for like over a dozen people. Hallelujah. Thank you, Saint, because the biggest fucking nightmare that I have every time I'm at an event is when the burden of figuring out dinner falls on my shoulders. Like, F that. That is the worst possible thing. So you guys don't know how awesome. Well, you definitely know how awesome it is. Just for Saint to organize dinner is a huge thing. But I saw Saint at the celebrational. He was crushing it. It wasn't even a matter of like he's just there to have fun. The fact that he's that he's involved to the capacity of also playing, representing the team, but handling it from an organizational perspective and lending advice to that seems to be where a lot of this is now going, because you have a team like PCG Pass where PCG grading is in the name. Fabled Hunters, Fabled Runaways now is kind of in the name. These are businesses. They're revenue generating entities to a degree, and they're now involved. Now, whether that revenue is significant or not, I know PCG is doing very well, but it's becoming like, all right, like, I don't know if you guys are sports fans, but they say it's not about winning or losing. This sports team is a business. There's an owner, there's a manager, there's people who are dealing with the finances of it. Do you, Dan, envision this as being ultimately a revenue generating endeavor? And I'm not talking about selling gold foils and picking up checks at a Battle Hardened. I'm talking more so about the fact that, hey, this is now a brand, and it's a brand that we are building to sort of increase our reputation, our integrity. People are going to want to invest in this. We can kind of create a revenue stream out of this. Has that ever crossed your mind?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think the team side's kind of hard, and like the industry's like not really there, especially for the card game right now. But like on the organizational side, we're definitely striving for like that type of thing. We have some pretty like hefty growth goals for this year. Really, we're just trying to like, we started to monetize a little bit, and that just allows us to like invest in more things. We're really just trying to grow our reach and like what we're offering the community as much as we can for now. That's kind of our short-term focus, is just like doing as much as we can. Like we see a lot of opportunity to provide value to the community, and that's why we jumped in. Like we saw that we could use another competitive podcast, so we started a podcast. We saw that there's not a good way for people in remote locations to draft, so we started a Discord where you can draft together. So that's kind of where we're operating right now, but we definitely have like long-term goals of like just growing this to as big as it can go. And if the money comes, the money comes. If we just have enough money to keep doing what we're doing, that's fine too.
Yeah, I never went into podcasting and content creation for the paychecks. That is absolutely not the goal. I mean, if the passion and the drive is there as like at the foundational level, yeah, everything else that gets sprinkled on is like it's gravy. But ultimately, I think that's a very reasonable approach. And what you guys have done, you know, the podcast is doing well. You have all these other entities or these other, you know, projects that you guys are working on that people can take advantage of. But when it comes down to business, you guys are a competitive team. You got to prepare. And we have a Pro Tour that is a couple of weeks away with a volatile, unsettled meta that everybody is either, okay, what are we hating on this week? What is busted this week? And what's completely garbage the next week? This is all up in the air. And I'm going to give you guys an example. And that example, I believe, was at Worlds. It may have been at Worlds where many people were on Bravo and many people were way off of Bravo. It was a school of thought that was so split down the middle that some were just like, no, this is the truth. And the others were like, that's a dream. So moving into this particular tournament, Pro Tour Los Angeles, with this particular meta, Cody, can you walk us through what a typical, you know, when do you start the prep? And what does it look like moving into the time where you guys are like going to bed the night before, you know, the Friday?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. My current role on the team side is as coach for this cycle. So I've been the one who's been running most of the meetings, and then we have Yuanji, who's kind of our strategic leader in the aspect of him and I got together before the whole cycle started and kind of went over what we want to do every week. Obviously, it's adjustable. But this started, 5 weeks ago? At this point is when we first started running meetings, getting ready. I'm going to be a little touchy on this subject. I could give lots of details, but I think this is actually where our secret sauce is as a team.
Okay, no, I do want to sort of preface
I'll give you
this.
broad strokes here.
Perfect. Yeah. I don't want to. I don't want you to give away
through all of the. Yeah.
Beauty.
Everything else, I'm totally fine with talking about.
Yeah.
This is like the one thing that we've been refining this for like a year and a half, every single cycle, just like cutting out the junk, putting the good stuff in to like try and really narrow it down. I feel comfortable saying at this point, like everyone on the team's locked on a deck, basically. Like we're like we're ready to go. That was like one of, you know, the things that we're trying to work on. But that's just kind of how it works. Like, I think we're the earliest starting team. I think a lot of teams don't start until like maybe a couple weeks ago. That's at least what they're mentioning publicly. But we were very serious about like as soon as the set dropped and we knew what was in the set, it was that week we had a meeting to brainstorm what decks we think are good, start exploring. And then it was like the week after that, we have formalized meetings to, you know, discuss findings. And then it was like, we have a lock-in date, decide your date here. And then, you know, we're working on what we're going to do at Pro Tour now. Like we're past all those stages, which I think a lot of teams right now are still probably looking at, you know, what they possibly are going to be playing. They're still trying to figure out where they think the meta is going to be.
Yeah, I didn't want to sort of, I don't want to like shake up the secret sauce, and I completely respect that, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, we're so close, so freaking close, because people want to structure how they practice with the pros. They want to sort of emulate what they're doing to see these results consistently. And the fact that you guys locked in decks already, I don't want to say that's surprising. I think that that's a very interesting thing to sort of dig into, because Yuanji, you as
might be wrong. Well, it might 100% be wrong. We don't normally lock in this early. I'll just throw that out there. Like,
so is that confidence then? Like, is that extreme confidence, or is that just the norm where you're like, we gotta?
How else are you going to refine a system if you don't you got to throw something that you haven't done in the last time, you throw it in this one. Maybe next time we're like, no, that was a terrible idea. Like it didn't work out well and we refine it again. But you know, that's like one of the things I can give people is like, it's just like every cycle we sit down, we plan out what we're doing for the cycle. We cut things that we don't think were good. We put in new things we want to test. And we've been doing this for 4-5 cycles now. And so like it's getting there. And I think we've seen our results get better for that. And this is just one of the things we've added to this cycle. So we will find out if it is a good idea or not.
I love it. Well, that's part of the beauty of it, is the fact that you don't know, because you're showing up. It's especially if a game that doesn't have a digital client, it's not all homogenized into one snow globe that you just kind of say, well, we just wait for the snow to settle. No, everybody's regionalized and everything can change. But when everybody kind of coalesces in one location, it could be chaos, or it could just be exactly the harmony that you guys predicted. Ultimately, for you, Yuanji, do you ever think that there's a situation, or, I don't want to say do you ever think, because there's going to be a situation where, for example, you guys say you're locked in on particular decks that you guys are all confident in, but we are going through RTN seasons, we're seeing how those RTN results change. Do you, when you are kind of met with results that may be different than how you guys anticipated or what you guys prepared for, do you guys just say we need to double down on practice into this meta and figure things out and maybe switch a card or two around? Or do you guys just say we need to sort of rethink how we completely envisioned this meta?
I don't think anything that's happened this season so far has been surprising, honestly. I would say that probably you first have to answer why are you getting surprised by the results. And so there might be something in your process that you're missing out on, some kind of like way that you're looking at the game. I would say that if something happened that is like truly surprising, I mean, like it's hard to talk about like a hypothetical situation, because like obviously, let's say, for example, like when Michael Hamilton won US Nationals with Icelander with attacks, right? And then that deck was more or less like completely unknown to everyone before that tournament. If something to that degree happens again, then yeah, of course we would have to reevaluate. But I think the main thing that I want to, I guess, push to the people who are listening who are actively trying to get better is like, you really want to do like the most in your power to not get surprised by stuff like that. And like by improving on by like figuring out like why you got surprised by something and improving on that aspect for future events, I think you're gonna end up getting better results overall.
Respectable. I appreciate that answer. And moving into this tournament, Dan, you've had your share of obviously games with high stakes. You all have. I've seen you all on camera. I've casted, I think, all of your matches. Cody, you're one of the first people that I've ever got to cast a batch. I think it was in Indianapolis, way the hell back when. You were playing Chain in those days, and I've cast.
I miss it.
Chain was a different beast, dude. Like, that's the thing about it. But that's how I know you. Like, I know you as the person who played Chain. Dan, you're the guy who played, who went undefeated in Swiss on Fi. And Yuanji, you're just Yuanji. Like, everybody knows Yuanji. Like, you're just an entity in yourself, my friend. You're a personality. But all this to say is that at your core, you're competitors, and you strive to win, and you have a structure now, and Team Runaways is moving in this direction where, you mentioned that value is not necessarily directly correlated to results, but you got to think that if you guys are not placing well, something's wrong. Because when I put out the tweet on the Instant Speed Twitter account, the amount of mudslinging that was going on was actually kind of funny. And don't get me wrong, because I have been pumping the tires on having these kinds of like interactions and a little bit of animosity between teams, and I don't believe that it's actually rooted in any type of hatred or any kind of thing. I think the fact that you guys are kind of throwing barbs back and forth is freaking awesome. Like, throw shade back and forth. Let's get some real kind of rivalry going here. But for you, Dan, does it feel better when you're winning against another team? Like, do you, I don't say you play differently, but is there just a little bit of a chip on your shoulder when you're like, I just want to beat this Wolfpack bastard, or like, I just want to shove it up this PCG pass player or whatever. Now, obviously, that's a little bit vulgar, but you know what I mean.
Not at all from the team aspect. Like, I don't care what team you're on. I don't care who you are. But like, I would prefer to like play the best player in the room every round. That sounds great. And if I win that event, I'm gonna feel amazing. I don't care like what a team they're associated with.
You're just a stone cold killer, man. You're just like,
I don't think we're there yet. It's not like I don't sit down and be like, oh, it's a Wolfpack member type of deal. But I do sit down quite often and be like, oh, it's this good player. And then I'm like, when I beat them, I'm like, haha, like, we did it. Like that feels good. It's more of the individual than the team right now.
So that's
and honestly,
sorry, go ahead.
Now, I was gonna say all the teams are like, at least in North America, I'm sure globally too, but like all the North American teams, like we're like good friends at all the events. Like we talk a lot of smack when we play and online, which is fun, but like we're like all pretty close friends for the most part.
That's the part of the fun, obviously. It's just like when the personality's injected into everything, at the end of the day, everybody's, having a beer in the hotel lobby and having a good time. But what you mentioned, Cody, actually kind of just, I want to touch upon that, where you say it has nothing to do with the team. Like I know the player before I know the team. Do you think that is going to get shifted? Because a lot of people talk about, oh, it's a Wolfpack member or it's a Team Runaways member or whatever, this or that. Do you think that having somebody see the jersey before the face and be more intimidated by the jersey than, does Team Runaways strive to be a team wherein, let's say you have a brand new member and somebody walks in and be like, oh my God, I don't know who this person is, but they're on Team Runaways. I'm screwed. Or, this is going to be a tough out. Like, is that where you guys want to be recognized as that type of team? Or are you guys more inclined for, I don't say personal clout, but having that kind of aura around your name versus the team?
I mean, it's more of something like we want people who see Runaway members we want them to want to interact with them. Is like the different feeling that we get. And for at least for me and for several people on the team, I know we've been feeling that especially a lot lately because we just had RTN season. So every RTN I went to, I had people come up and talk to me about the podcast and talk to me about, this stuff. Or if I sat down and play, they were excited, at least some of them were excited to play against me. Some people were, it's like round one, can I not play against you, type of feelings. But for the most part, like we're hoping that when people see the Runaways, that they want to play against these members, one, to test themselves and beat them, because that's always a good strat. I think that's a good like mentality to have if you're playing a competitive card game, right? So for some people, they feel that. For other people, we just want them to feel comfortable coming up and talking and interacting with us. But to have people be like, hey, that's a really good team, so if someone has that jersey on, they're probably a good player. I mean, that'd be a great goal, but that's probably in the future, right?
So do you think that there's a situation where if you guys are just not seeing results, that there might be a full retrospective, almost even like a reset to a degree, Yuanji? Like, do you guys have to have, we had 8 people in this battle hardened. We had 2 of them in the top 8. I think that's fine. We had 2 in the top 8. We had 6 in the top 16. Like, things are going well. But what happens if you guys have like 2 callings in a battle hardened where your best result is like somebody finished like 10th? Like, at what point is there a little self-reflection?
So we always reevaluate, especially most of our formalized testing revolves around, Pro Tours and Worlds. So, like, I'll be frank, like, we didn't have great results at Worlds, right? I think Cody was one of the only players on the team who managed to make a deep run. And so it's part of, like, the process that we try to, after every event, even if it's good or if it's bad, because it's easy to miss out on mistakes when you're doing well, and it's also very easy to just like point out flaws if you're doing poorly. But I think every single cycle, there's always things that work and things that don't work, and so we always take like maybe like 1 or 2 weeks to decompress after the events, and then after that period of time when you've cooled down and you can think about things a little bit more rationally, then we go back after every single event and say, hey, like, this worked, this didn't work. And yeah, like if there's an event where the team as a whole did like very poorly, then we're gonna try to, there's a little bit more urgency in figuring out, hey, like what are the things that contributed to that.
So let's get into a little bit of a more, I don't want to say touchy subject, but it's a little more dangerous, a little bit more risque, which is I call it espionage. It's such a more scary word than what it really is. But the reality is that I have heard many stories. These are not like even rumors. They're just facts that there have been situations of people who have either tested with other people and then just dipped, or brought someone in, got like squeezed, wrung out all the information out of them and then throw them out like a used rag and said, well, we're going to do our own thing now. How much of this is, and you already alluded to it, Cody, because you said, I'm not gonna, shake all the coconuts out of the tree, but there's some information here that we are concealing. How protective are you, and what are some of the measures when it comes to this kind of stuff? Because there's a lot of money on the line. It's not just prestige. There's significant stakes to be had here. So how do you approach things like the spy networks that might occur in competitive Flesh and Blood?
It's one of the reasons we don't take in new people during a cycle. So I can say that, like, we don't recruit during a cycle. We only recruit before a cycle. And so that's pretty important. It's also why everyone on the team is also providing information, right? Like, they're providing value while they're there. One of the big mentalities that we've taken, and I'll get right back to the question, is that, like, everyone on the team has the same mentality, or at least this cycle. It's, I am going to win Pro Tour. And if not, then our ideas will win Pro Tour. And so, like, you get that buy-in at the beginning, and then everyone is giving information. So we know no one on the team is compromised, right? For the most part. Now, as far as going like information leaking or sharing, it's hard to talk about the topic because it's like security on computers. Once you like say how the security works, then you're able to like run it back and figure out, what is real and what isn't, right? But for the most part, we don't really obfuscate that much. Like, to be honest, like there is knowledge in knowing what people are doing, but it's not to that point right now where it's that big of a deal. If I'm on our podcast and I'm giving my opinions, they're my legitimate opinions. Like, we hold ourselves to a different standard where I'm not going to say something I don't believe in, and people on our podcast aren't going to say things they don't believe in. And the information that we provide to the community is not going to be information that we don't believe in. Are we going to protect things? Absolutely. Are we going to not share the game plans, share sideboards, share like things that are really, nitty gritty? Absolutely. And that's kind of how we protect ourselves. As of right now, we've never ran into or been in a situation where we've had to deal with like espionage from another team yet, but we're also pretty closed off on where our information is located. So it'd be pretty hard for someone to do that and then ship it somewhere else, especially because we're not letting people in to where that information is, right?
It's just cool to say espionage in the context of something nerdy like what we do here. It's just it's just adding stakes to it, because again, a lot of the conversations I have when it comes to people and just talking when they ask me like what I do and this and that, and you card tournaments. So like what, like on the weekends at the corner store? Like, well, no, this weekend there people were playing for $200,000, and they're like, pardon me, what? I'm like, yes. So there's obviously a lot of weight behind some of these major tournaments. Protecting your advantage is important, and being a team is definitely a significant advantage. And moving forward with this reshaping and sort of the ebbs and flows of what competitive Flesh and Blood looks like, teams are going to have a significant advantage. And for you, Dan, because you had an exceptional run, it was at Worlds, right, against Michael Hamilton? Or was it Pro Tour?
Worlds and Nationals.
Yeah, it was this rematch. Yeah, it was both. Yeah. But you were playing those as without the network of a team, correct?
It was just Yuanji, Shane, and I were like, we're going to do this thing. And we're like, this is like what anyone could do at home, right? Like,
yeah, well, that's
make your team go do this.
That's what I want to get at is, are like the hopes and dreams of any kind of, one singular person with their network of one or two friends that they play with or that they trust, are those, is that done? Is that, or like, what's the gap in the advantage now? It seems like between all these other teams that have a dozen plus people that are all sharing ideas, the dude who plays at the corner store with his buddies every weekend to practice and manage to get into a Pro Tour feels like they are absolutely outclassed, like by leaps and bounds. Is that an accurate assessment here? Or is the era of sort of like the Dan Rutkowski with one or two people practicing with it, making, getting these wicked finishes, is that over?
I don't think so at all. Like the advantage of a big group is it's there, right? It's not zero. It's not like gigantic. It's not small. I don't know where I would put it, right? But like if you can just get a group of a couple people that you trust, and like if you put in the work and like you iterate on your process and you put in the time and effort, like you can do it too. Your like scope is going to be smaller, right? Like you probably just want to like focus on one deck like we did, like 5. But you can like absolutely do that too. I don't see why not. But like again, like your scope has to be smaller, right? Like we're going to be able to evaluate what you're doing. I'm more 17, so like times 5, right? You just have to like understand what your advantages and disadvantages are, right? And like take advantage of the advantages and work on the disadvantages. But yeah, anyone can do it. Like if you want to win and do the best you can do, just start doing it. Like figure it out.
I want to dispel something here though. While there is a large advantage for the team, it's mainly that we get to cover more aspects of the game than most people do. But the reason that like the person who plays at the corner store is not very likely to win Pro Tour, even if they qualify, is because they just don't put in as much time as the people on the other teams do. When Dan was on that 3-person team, they spent endless amounts of time playing the game, learning Fi, refining single matchups, like their Bravo matchup. They just spent endless amounts of time. I mean, I personally, when I was playing Chain, spent before the Nationals I got top 4 at, I spent 40 hours on just the Bravo matchup, just learning just that one matchup. It's like, that's why they're not going to win. Like it has not because they're not on a team. If they can grab 3 players who want to dedicate, an infinite amount of time to learning, playing, getting good, and genuinely just want to get better and work on a deck and do strategies, they can absolutely win a tournament. It's just like most of those people who are willing to do that are on teams. Like that's where those players go, is the people who are putting in all that time and all that work and all that effort. Like they gravitate towards a team because other people, recognize that they're also putting in that same level of effort. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have made the Discord that we have for people who want to put in that time but don't have other people who want to put in that time. They can join our Discord and then meet other people who are trying to both put in that amount of time. That felt like a need in the community. But that's the real aspect, is you have to actually put in the work to like, it's irregardless of if you're on a team or not.
So I'm going to come to you with this, and Yuanji, because what you guys are saying, I think, is completely true. And it doesn't make it any less scary for the person who is kind of on their own, because like you said, yeah, there's a lot of time. And when Dan did it, and you guys did it, it's just like you said, you put in 40 hours just for one particular matchup. You had a smaller network of people to rely on or practice. But part of this is all going to be when you're on a team. It's like, all right, you 2 or 3 people focus on this matchup. Let us know what you think. Let us know how to solve it and how to figure it out. But now saying this, it just sounds to me like, yeah, they don't have a chance because they don't have the time. And now somebody who might be listening to this and be like, well, I don't have either 40 hours a week to devote just to practice, and I don't have a network of people that I can trust to come up with the results to help me get there. Maybe it's just not even within my grasp to do so. And I would never, ever discourage anybody from wanting to compete and go out there, because every dog has its day. And I've had, some good successes out there, not because I'm putting in 40 or some odd hours, but maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. But Yuanji, when it comes down to it, can you kind of like say something to encourage that dude, that person who's out there who's just being like, well, shit, I don't have the time to put in, so maybe I just won't?
I mean, it depends though. Like, I don't know, the battle hardened that I won on Vincent in Blitz, I think I practiced that deck for 10 games.
This was in Salt Lake, was it?
Yeah. Like, it depends. I don't think that there's like a shortcut around like total time that you spend playing the game. Like, you just have to play Flesh and Blood to get better at Flesh and Blood. And one of the things that in all competitive games that I've witnessed to date is that a lot of people might feel like there's an early movers advantage for the people who like got into the game early, but in most competitive games that you find, I think the people who start getting involved in the game, as long as they're very passionate about it and they're willing to dedicate the requisite amount of time, they actually can learn faster than all the people who kind of started off early on, because there's just better resources. The theory of the game is more well understood, and that's also kind of like one of the things that we're trying to put out there when we have time is just like improving the total amount of resources that people have access to in order to get better at the game. But like in any like competitive video game, in sports, like whatever you name it, like the people who are starting later, they don't necessarily have an advantage, but they have the benefit of all of the work that other people have put beforehand. And so there's like a wealth of knowledge that's available. You can like search for it on the internet. You can reach out to most people. I think who play this game are fairly open about sharing information. If you approach them with the pretext of trying to get better, like if you message, I don't know, like Fino or Mara or whatever, and you have some questions about Dromai, I'm sure that they'll answer them. If you message Cody and you have some questions about Chain during that time, I'm sure that he would like answer them as long as you like have something specific rather than like how do I win with this deck. And so I think that overall, for anybody who's like trying to get involved and who really wants to do well, I think as long as you put in work and as long as you have, like the confidence that you can beat anybody in the world on a given day, I think that it's not necessarily like easier for you, but it like the later on that you try to get into it, the easier it is relative to like the amount of time that other people have put in beforehand.
Sounds fair. I have learned a lot from the three of you. You guys have been exceptionally insightful and open about this to a degree. You got to keep your secrets. But I want to just go around the horn one more time and ask you this question for all three of you. I'll start with you, Dan. For those out there who are not on teams and who want to create one because they're like, hey, there's 3 or 4 of us. Let's start building something here. Can you give a piece of advice to that person who wants to start their own competitive team and really shore up and consolidate all that knowledge and all that effort?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest one is like, just do it. Like, if you're motivated and your group is motivated, just start doing it. Like, figure it out as you go. And really just like kind of like you need to understand like what resources you have access to. Like I was saying before, like understand like the strengths and weaknesses of your group and kind of like build towards that. But yeah, just like get started. Just do the thing. I don't know.
It's good enough. There's Tommy Wiseau, the guy who made the room. He was doing like an AMA once, and somebody said, "Hey, I want to start writing a script. What should I do?" And his reply was, "Just start." And that was like the best. I was like, that's totally on. Like, it sounds so simple, but you're right. Like, most people always want to kick things off being perfect. No, nobody's perfect right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's all it was for us. It was like, we think we need this thing. Let's just do it. Let's figure it out. And we figured it out.
Nice. Cody, how about yourself? What kind of piece of advice that isn't just do it?
Yeah. I'll give a tangible step that I would recommend first-time teams do together. So you, 2 buddies, right? You've talked about it. You're all relatively around the same commitment level of how serious you want to take a card game, right? Like, that's like step 1. Step 1 is how be on the same wavelength that you all want to be, take it at that same serious level. So you get the buy-in, right? The first thing I would do is, let's say you all want to play Levia, for example, or Levia. I would sit down and I would Hydra a game together. I think this is a great technique that people should use when they're all trying to learn and get better together at the same time. Have one person pilot the deck, have the other people on the team watch, and then as you're playing the deck, you all talk about all the lines you could do on that turn together and what is more optimal. What it does is it converges everyone's current skill level together, so that you can see what other people are thinking in those moments. And then it allows you to actually, hopefully together as a team, come to the best conclusion of what you can do. So it does a lot of team building at the beginning. It does a lot of finding out where people's strengths might be, where their current skill level is. And then also it helps you all improve it, because with that many minds and talking about all the different possible plays on that turn, let you come to a conclusion together. So that would be my tangible advice to do right off the bat.
Wonderful. Very helpful. And I think that's great. How about for yourself, Yuanji?
I think if you are serious about trying to get better at the game, I think you really gotta try to be organized. You want to make sure that you don't like end up double dipping on the work that you do. So when you guys like set out to do like drafts, right? Like you want to make the use out of like every draft that you do. So everything that you do should be working towards answering some kind of question, and never just like playing games for the sake of playing games, right? So as long as you approach everything and try to build a system around it, I think that you can do as good as any of like the top teams, because all the other people who are on teams, the only advantage that they have on you is that they just got in the game earlier than you did.
Makes sense. Well, gentlemen, I do sincerely appreciate you all being on the show. And ever since we were sipping drinks in a... Those seas were rocking, man. Like, I don't know if you remember that, but like when
I do.
We were talking about this in a hot tub on a cruise ship while the ship was like going through a storm, and we're just like, yeah, we're fine. Like, if we die, we die in 2 layers of water. Like, it's all good. Like, we'll just get there.
I miss that cruise every day.
It's happening again. Like, I don't think it's not going to be a realm related one, but
it needs to happen.
It is. For those who are listening, we'll talk about it if you see us. But it was one of the coolest experiences. 16 people, 2 pods of draft every night, dinner, drinks, the whole 9 yards. It was so great. And hot tub, yeah, had to be. Thank you all so much for sharing your insights and just and the discussion. You guys have a lot of more prep to do, more reps to do. I will see you guys in, I guess, Philadelphia potentially, but other than that, definitely in Los Angeles. I want to go around the horn one more time. Just tell us where you guys can be found, your socials, all that kind of stuff. And just because, I want you all to also say which team you hate the most, because we're throwing shade. So just say something really questionable about another team. Throw some, a left hook, a jab here and there. Dan?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at DiscGolfDan. Otherwise, check out the Runaways Discord. In terms of the team stuff, I don't really concern myself too much with the other teams. I'm just kind of focused on what we're doing, and I think we're doing a pretty good job.
That's pretty good. Look, I know that you didn't want to do it, but you kind of like backhanded be like, I don't concern myself with like peons and peasants.
They can do what they do. I know what we do is better, so it's fine.
See, it's in there, Dan. You just gotta squeeze it out. You had it in there. Beautiful. How about yourself, Cody?
Yeah, I can be found on Twitter at MantonFab, or in almost all the Discords as Manton. As far as the team stuff go, I read your Twitter thread because it's been blowing up. Like I feel it's like every like 4 minutes I have like 20 new notifications of just things that are happening in your thread. But I saw a very good comment that said scoreboard. You know, it was like scoreboard is important. And my argument is, I think any team, the best team in the world is probably any team who has Brody and Fang on it, just those 2 players. If they move to any team in the United States, they would now then be the best team in the world by scoreboard. I think that's an important distinction to have.
Dude, it was like when LeBron left the Cavaliers, they went from like a championship team to a lottery team. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, let's just be real here. Yuanji,
they could be their own team and they would be the best team.
Yes.
Like, just those 2 players, just the 2 guys together, they would just have like the best scoreboard, right? Like, so.
Well, Brody is the original runaway, for the record.
Yeah. For the record.
Well,
he started the team and then he ran away.
Yeah, then then he's gone. Dude, like whenever they're like in the booth, I'm like, hey, we have a top 8, not a top 6. Like, wait, that's amazing. Like, it's incredible how that kind of goes. How about you, Yuanji? Where can we find you? And let's just throw some shade.
You can find me on Twitter or X at Yuanji Lee. And I don't know. Yeah, I'm with Dan. There's like no real reason to throw shade. Like,
because they all suck, right? Right?
Yeah. I don't think those guys are going to do very well.
Okay,
we believe in what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it better.
You guys are too nice, man. Like, I'm literally trying to turn this into the WWE, but like nobody's buying in. I'm going to still continue to lay the breadcrumbs there to have these kinds of these rivalries. Still, the fact that you guys are doing what you're doing. You guys are crushing it. It's just great to see. And I sincerely, again, I want to thank you all for being on the show. I love doing this ahead of major events with different teams, with different perspectives, and learning how the team operates and what you guys are doing. You guys are doing it well. So I want to say congratulations on your success, and I want to wish you well in LA, because you guys are awesome. So thanks for doing the show.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.
All right, I want to give a last shout out to our sponsor at The Realm Games. You guys can go check out therealmgamingnetwork.com. There's another Realm circuit happening, a big Realm Rumble. 50 Gs are on the line again this year, so you guys want to make sure that you guys are qualifying for these tournaments. Last year, the Realm Rumble was insane. Some of you were there, I believe. It was a great experience, and that's happening again. To our Patreon subscribers, thank you again for keeping the lights on over here. For as little as $2 a month, you can give me a pat on the back. But for tier 3 Patreon subscribers, we're going to get these 3 clowns here to start throwing a little bit of shade. We're going to try to play a little game. So go again. Got some questions for them, and they're going to stick around for that. So you guys can catch that on Sundays on Patreon. And for everybody else, thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed Podcast. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning. We'll see you next week on ISP. Bye.
Well, I work hard. How come everybody wants to shuffle my cards? And I think that it's true. There's nothing else